Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Wednesday, April 6th. It is Solidarity Wednesday. You know, every week we have our dear friend Benjamin Dixon on. I joined him this morning, had a great time. Go check out the Benjamin Dixon Show. They do the morning show. They got their act together like before 9 o'clock in the morning, or actually well before then. So always a pleasure being on his show. He's going to join us in the second half of today's show, where we are going to have two special guests who are running for Congress, two Black women. I say that because they were recently part of Black Women Run in DC. It was an event. We are going to have Imani Oakley and Stephany Spaulding, who are running for Congress. That event featured Black women who are running for Congress across the country, all progressive, of course. They're going to talk about that and what their candidacies mean with our dear friend, Benjamin Dixon. But before that, our first guest is the executive director of AAPI Victory Alliance and was previously with AAPI's Victory Fund, Varun Nikore. I hope I'm saying your last name right.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Our first guest is the executive director of AAPI Victory Alliance and was previously with AAPI's Victory Fund, Varun Nikore. I hope I'm saying your last name right.
You got it.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I got it. Yes. Varun, thanks for joining the show. I wanted to talk to you about really what's happening in the South right now and what kind of court decisions and moves by the courts to basically not, we all see what's happening in Georgia with redistricting plans and different parts of the country right now with redistricting plans to stifle votes and to the tax on voting rights. But how is this specifically affecting the AAPI community?
Yeah, so I think what the folks on the right saw in the 2020 election was this massive turnout of all people of color who came out and voted, many for the first time ever. And in past years, our community really wasn't targeted, specifically. We weren't reached out to by campaigns. And thus, if there was any voting restrictions the Republicans could be very creative about coming up with, our community really wasn't targeted. But that all changed in 2020. They saw this massive surge of voters in places like Georgia, in places like Arizona, which, if you look at the South and the Sun Belt, those are the fastest growing states in the country. And particularly for AAPIs, we tend to be in all those Southern and Sun Belt states, the fastest growing segments of the population. So when 2020 hit, they saw that, AAPIs are starting to vote, whereas they weren't before. Let's double down on the voting restrictions that they had already proposed in years past, targeted at other people of color, but now thinking about how we restrict the rights of AAPIs to vote as well.
So it's really because of the voting patterns and have changed. It's not because there's a new wave of immigrants coming to or to this country, or that there's a generation that's growing up the way Dreamers are now of age to vote, and there's discussion over granting Dreamers citizenship. So this really is just about voting habits.
It is. I mean, so the AAPI community has been the fastest growing population in this country since 2000. Wow. And that is expected to increase. There was a little bit of a, let's call it a pandemic or COVID lull in immigration amongst all communities, in 2020 or so. But we're expecting that to rise even further going forward in terms of our community's growth, simply because this country has a labor shortage, right? The unemployment rate as of last week was 3.6%. And where are we going to get all of these workers in the future? They're going to come for the most part, from places that they've come from historically already, and that's going to be Asia and the Pacific Islands.
So, what are they doing specifically in these different states? Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina. How are they going about this legally?
Well, several things, right? So the voting restrictions that they are trying to enact were, in many cases, enacted in 2000 because of the pandemic, right? They, a lot of legislatures made it easier to vote, right? So they would have mail drop-off boxes. They would allow a little bit more flexibility in terms of, registering to vote and voting online or from home, right? And so most of those restrictions, which a lot of people of color took advantage of, and certainly APIs did, they are now clawing back and making it harder. They're trying to impose, in many cases, additional voter ID requirements, right? And so it's all of these things that were in some ways started in Georgia, and then much like we've seen in other arenas on reproductive justice and other areas, they are now starting to come up with, they're taking the Georgia laws and cookie cuttering them in Arizona, in Texas, in Pennsylvania, and in North Carolina to the degree that they can. And so we've seen this repeated pattern because they know what the trends are, right? There's a shrinking number of white people in this country, and what's growing are people of color. And so there's only one path to victory for Republicans in the future, and that is to restrict the rights of AAPIs and other people of color in voting.
And at the Supreme Court level, what's the positioning been when it's gone up the ladder and these decisions have been challenged?
Well, we've won some and we've lost some, but the bottom line is that we need to protect the rights of all Americans to vote in free and fair elections, right? So what's the genesis of all these voting rights restrictions? It was not only the surge of voters that happened, but it's because of the big lie that the folks on the right, particularly Donald Trump, had said, all these elections that he lost in Arizona and Georgia, and even places where he didn't lose, he is essentially saying that that there was some shenanigans going on. And frankly, the only shenanigans that were really going on were amongst Republicans, right? It was his own chief of staff that voted twice in an election, that voted in a place that he wasn't even registered to vote. So that's the irony of all this. Yeah. But of course, folks on the right continue to perpetrate these lies and the misinformation and disinformation, and once again, trying to restrict the rights of all voters. And unfortunately, the politics of this all has now reached the highest court in our land. Of course, you can do a whole nother segment, and maybe you already have, on Ginny Thomas and Clarence Thomas.
Oh, every day I wake up, I'm like, oh, another story. This is great. Reminds me of that one you're talking about, voting twice. There's our friends over at the Good Liars got this woman on camera a few years ago. It was really funny, where she was protesting voter fraud. And they got her to admit that she did once try to vote twice, but she was a felon, so she couldn't. So they don't even realize when they're doing it. I want to also touch on, are these attacks, are they being explicit about targeting? I mean, sometimes they are explicit about their intentions. Are they being explicit about targeting not just immigrants, but the AAPI community?
Yeah, I think too, right, the AAPI community, approximately 30 to 35% of AAPIs are limited English proficient, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you were living in a society where you really wanted all people to vote, you would put voting information in multiple languages. Well, in certain cases, there's been some restrictions on that, right? Mm-hmm. You would allow a person who maybe was more proficient in English walk in with a person who wasn't, and in certain cases, they've tried to restrict those rights as well. So on the margins, right, this clamps down on, frankly, a lot of people who would vote for Democrats. When you add those systemic and structural barriers, it makes it harder for all of us to vote. And you don't want that impediment. You want to make it easy. You want to make it stress-free. You want to make it intimidation-free. And that's not what's happening right now in a lot of these Republican states that have Republican legislatures.
And knowing this, I'm not sure if they've been like so direct yet, but the AAPI community has been targeted during the pandemic, and a lot of this is due to for President Trump's rhetoric that is just over the top. I'm wondering if there's like any sort of if it's playing together in any way.
Yeah, it really has been. And sort of the downside of all the rhetoric we see every day, the violence all across our land perpetrated primarily against East Asians and in some cases, South Asians, particularly Sikh Americans, who are unfortunately walking billboards, right? That, come attack me because I'm different, right?
Right.
And so but what this has led to, quite frankly, is in the 2020 election, it led to the highest increase in engagement of any demographic in the history of our country, right? There was a 46% increase in voting, 47% increase in voting between 2016 and 2020 amongst the AAPI community. That has not happened before in any instance that I can find ever recorded in the history of our country, where you increase your vote, any demographic increase their vote by that much in one election cycle.
Incredible.
So what Trump did inadvertently was not only increase our voting and our reliability for voting for Democrats, but he has created a movement like we have never seen in this country. The term Asian American was coined in the late 70s. There was a mini movement at that time when it was around the time of Black solidarity, Black power, and Latino power as well. But that moment and that movement didn't last but a year or two. But this moment and movement that we're in today is, I believe, much more sustaining and will have net benefit for the nation, net benefit for Democrats going forward because of the vicious rhetoric that was coming out of Donald Trump and his administration's mouth on a daily basis during his presidency.
You're also involved in supporting, folks who are running from the AAPI community. Is there an increase in number of candidates running? Since
2016, there has been a vast increase, not only in the number of AAPIs, but the number of women running in this country. And that's so gratifying because, of course, AAPIs, women are all underrepresented. All people of color are underrepresented in the halls of Congress and in city councils and school boards, right? And so the good, sort of the positive of the last, 6 years, if you will, is that you see more of this dynamic shifting. And in fact, our organization, the API Victory Alliance, just last week announced the first ever national endorsement process of folks who are at the state and local level.
Oh, great.
Right? So a lot of times in politics, as you know, all the attention is paid on Congress, right? The flashy, glitzy elections of Congress and Senate. And that's important. It's important that we have majorities there. But for us to have true empowerment, we really need it at the state and local level. If we can get it at that bottom of the pyramid, then that naturally means over time you will have more people of color and APIs and women in office by virtue of just creating a large base at the very bottom.
And it can happen very quickly too. I mean, over time is within a decade, under a decade. It would be helpful if the Democrats, the Democratic Party, thought that it was worth investing in states too. Just an idea to put out there.
Novel concept.
Shouldn't have to put all the burden on all the groups outside of the party to do so. With that being said, though, are there who's handling all these legal efforts right now? Who, when there's a redistricting situation, like in so many of these different states, who's there to represent you?
So I think the tip of the spear in many cases is the Eric Holder-led effort, the National Redistricting Legislative Committee, but it's really the folks in the states that are running point on a day-to-day basis. And so those are progressive groups. They're groups that are aligned as part of the America Votes table and other local tables. There are local funders in every state that are monitoring the issues. But there are the national groups, like I mentioned, the Eric Holder's group as well, that are really doing great work in terms of the legal arena, ensuring that we don't let up on any legal fights, that we contest every legal battle that we are allowed to contest. And so that, I think, has really helped us, because I think about a year ago, even a year and a half ago, a lot of folks on our side looked at 2022 and said Democrats were going to be decimated simply by virtue of we weren't controlling where a lot of the legislative maps were going to be drawn. Because if you don't own the state legislators, rather, you don't control the redistricting process. But here we are today, and now many analysts are saying, wow, this is the best possible outcome that we could have had in many cases. And so from by virtue of the way that the state maps are drawn, we actually have a little bit of wind at our back. Now, we don't have, unfortunately, with the amount of inflation in our economy and the fact that wages have certainly risen, but inflation maybe has grown a little bit faster. Unfortunately, we've got the national mood to contend with and not a lot of time to turn that around. So we still have a big battle ahead, but I think all is not lost, especially if we out-organize the right, which is what we've been doing, frankly, for the last 6 years. We just have to continue to fight this year as well.
And you don't control Fox News either. Because
that's right.
I just finished up over there, and the most important news of the day is Hunter Biden, by the way. Didn't know if you knew. Yeah,
exactly. Right.
You can't control that either.
Noun, adverb, and Hunter Biden is what they like to do, right?
What was that? The noun and verb. Yeah. Yes. I was trying to keep track of their logic. It was like one of those maps where there's a string here and there's another string here, and then this is connected to that. They led with, the proof is that Joe Biden once wrote a letter of recommendation for one of Hunter's friend's sons to go to college.
This so-called smoking gun.
That's it. Bring the Republicans back. That's right. Why.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a lot of work. And we're always playing defense, unfortunately. And it's not easy because it affects people's lives and their material interests. Really fascinating conversation. I would love for you to keep in touch with us about any other developments that might be happening, or any work you're doing, or any great candidates to feature, because it really does take a lot of organizing to be able to do this work. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Look forward to being back with you.
Thank you. Varun Nikore, who is the executive director of AAPI Victory Alliance. Go check him out. And we will be right back for Solidarity Wednesday. We have the wonderful Benjamin Dixon, who's going to be joining us with two incredible candidates running for Congress right now. We will be back right after this break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. It's Solidarity Wednesdays, which means our dear friend Benjamin Dixon is joining us today. Ben is the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, our ally. Are you outside still again?
I am outside again. You know, with as many kids as I have, 3 kids, it's difficult to find a quiet space these days. So good afternoon. I'm sorry I'm late, Nomiki.
Oh, you were fine. You were right on time. You're good. Don't worry. So what are you talking about? You're a busy guy. All right. So we love doing Solidarity Wednesdays because it's about building community, about learning from other allies in communities and how we can be better allies, right. How we can support folks that are doing good work, how we can elevate folks that are doing good work. And sometimes it's how we can take on folks who are trying to divide us and be aware of their tactics.
That's right.
This week, though, we are very honored to have 2 extraordinary women who are running for Congress right now. And I really want to have this conversation with you just because, you know, this is exactly the kind of work I think that we focus on. in our lives outside of media. Maybe people don't know that we don't live on the internet the whole time. There was an event just a few days ago in Washington, D.C. for Black women running for Congress. And two of the women that attended the event and spoke at the event called Black Women Run are here with us today. One is a candidate for Congress in New Jersey's 10th District, Imani Oakley. And our second candidate is Dr. Stephany Spaulding, who is running in Illinois' 1st District in a very crowded race I know all about now. So, this is maybe Ben, if you want, we can go back and forth just because we got a little bit of a full screen right now. I'm going to just do the thing that I always say, which is really important because if you ever read the book about Hillary Clinton's presidency, the one that was shattered, there was this moment in the book right at the beginning where they asked her the day of the election, the press walked up to her and said, "Hillary, why do you want to be president?" And she couldn't answer the question. She literally did she was all over the place. That is the thing you're supposed to learn or know and be able to say the first thing. So I'm going to ask you, start with Dr. Spaulding. Why do you want to be in Congress?
Because people that I know and love are suffering. And I know that I have skill set, gifts, and talents that can address this kind of suffering that is happening in my district. And we need folks who care about those who are hurting the most.
Wonderful. All right. Imani Oakley, who's running. Oh, we lost Ben for a second. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Imani Oakley. I'm running for Congress in New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. And I want to be in Congress because I am sick and tired of New Jersey's Tammany Hall machine style of politics, utilizing Black and brown and working class neighborhoods as nothing more than financial and political playgrounds. It is time that our neighborhoods have representation that is really going to fight for them when it comes to fixing issues of the environment, when it comes to housing stability, when it comes to economics, and somebody who is not just going to be there to keep their seat warm. So that's why I'm doing this.
Let's go to Dr. Spalding. Do we have Ben back? No, not yet. We lost Ben for our podcast listeners. Oh, there he is. Got him. Ben, do you have any questions for our lovely candidates here?
I had a chance I could hear everything that you all were saying, even though I had to step away from the screen for a moment. I am very fascinated with both of your races. Tell me what you feel distinguishes your race from any of your opponents. I'm not familiar with your opponents, but I'm sure you all are facing some fierce adversaries and competition. What distinguishes, if you don't mind going one at a time?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll go first. Our movement is 100% people powered, 100% grassroots. Before running for office, I was not in a political family. I was not born with a silver spoon inside of my mouth. I was raised by a single mom who was a preschool teacher. I have actually nearly lost my childhood home to foreclosure. In contrast, I'm running against a guy that takes $175K a year in taxpayer money to barely show up to work. He has one of the lowest attendance rates out of any, not just Democrats, but any member of Congress. And he inherited the seat from his dad. And on top of that, he's taking money from some of the worst actors. He's taking money from Raytheon, a weapons manufacturer, several oil pipeline PACs, the realtors PAC that tried to stop Elizabeth Warren and Cori Bush's eviction moratorium during the pandemic. Conversely, I'm taking zero money from corporate PACs, and I was still able to outraise him 2-1, my first ever fundraising quarter as a candidate. So, we are worlds apart, me and my opponent, and that's why I'm confident we're going to beat him on June 7th.
Stephany. Apologies.
Fantastic. Oh no, I mean that's what keeps America running, right? Transportation,
it's a good point.
and infrastructure. But like Imani, our campaign is 100% powered by everyday working people, right? And for people who grew up in the hood like myself, I grew up on the far south side of Chicago in Roseland and West Pullman. We often say, don't speak about it, be about it, right? And the work that is very near and dear to our heart in this campaign and what we are building is something that I have been doing for the last 5 years, right? It's not just I showed up on the scene and am fighting for voting rights, or I showed up on the scene wanting to abolish the filibuster. I've been in this fight at the national level, spokesperson for Just Democracy, I've been doing work around truth and conciliation. So I'm an advocate for reparations. And I just look at what's happening in my district, what's happening to people, again, like I know and love, where, you know, we live in food deserts, like amplified food deserts. I don't even know, like, I guess the Sahara is probably equivalent to the lack of resources that we have and have had over the last 30 years or so. And that in a lot of ways distinguishes my campaign from others in this race who may have been elected before or are standing on their family legacies, but not necessarily doing the work, getting their hands dirty and connecting to people at their doors, connecting with people in a very experiential level. I pull up to the gas station. I'm ready to cry just like everybody else, you know? Yeah. So I think that that's tremendously a difference that I am of and with working class people.
So I have a question, because you two, both of you have something in common in that, while one is an open seat, that's the seat that Dr. Spalding is running in. You know, Imani, you're running against an incumbent, but there is this legacy issue I find fascinating that pulls through both of your races. There are juniors running, juniors who have either inherited their seat or who want to essentially inherit the seat. I'll start with Imani. What does it mean? I mean, I think of someone like Cori Bush, who ran against a junior, took her a few times to run before she won. But when she did, oh boy, did she. Mm-hmm. How does it feel like when you're campaigning against somebody whose name has been in that district for so long, for several generations? Like, when you talk to folks, you know, at the door, older and younger, like what's the reaction about the man that you're running against?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I'm probably in a unique position, even more unique than Congresswoman Bush, because when I'm going door to door, I'm getting one of two reactions. Either people are saying he's not living up to his father's legacy. So they're like, yeah, it's time for new blood. I haven't seen him around here in years. His dad did so much work for the community, and I have no idea what he does. I haven't seen him since probably he got in. So that's what I'm getting from people who are familiar with him. And actually half of our district after redistricting is new. And so I've actually talked to people who thought I was the incumbent, and I had to explain to them, like, no, I'm actually a challenger. The incumbent is this person, et cetera, et cetera. And then they look him up and they're like, oh yeah, you know, you have my vote. So it's a unique position because he has done such little work both in the district and in Congress that either he's not known or the people that do know him are just disappointed in what they're seeing. So, you know, I'm feeling good, even though I'm going against a junior. And sometimes that does give people a boost. But in our situation, it's really, you know, it's not really helping.
Fascinating.
And Dr. Spalding, how's that play out? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, this is a unique situation where a 30-year incumbent decided that they are not going to seek re-election. So it creates an open opportunity for a number of people who perceive that they have been waiting in line, so to speak, or that the seat is owed to them because of their political connections and things of that nature. But I'm also, as you can tell, I'm also a person of faith. I pastored a congregation for 7.5 years. And what I hear at the door is very much a faith-centered response. To whom much is given, much is required. And how you are over a little is how you are over much, right? We have individuals who have been in office, and literally I have constituents who are saying, you didn't do anything as alderman. You didn't do anything as, you know, in the state legislature that has really tremendously shaped and changed our district. Why would I vote for you for this position? And so we're seeing that. And then there are others who are commenting and saying, like, you are the very first person who's ever knocked on my door, you know, to have those conversations one-on-one, who shows up and is concerned about me. And that's how we are building our base. That's how we are building the movement that this campaign is.
Reverend Dr. Spalding.
I know, right?
Yeah, no, I, you know, a very similar background. I would love to hear you talk more about your I guess I would have to assume like liberation theology and the kind of mindset is the root of what drives you, simply by just looking at the website just now and listening to you speak. Do you listen, or do you find any solace from other liberation theologists that are out there who are doing really great things, like Dr. William Barber? You have Raphael Warnock. You have quite a few people who instead of this evangelical right-wing faith that is attacking and harming people, we have another side that says, no, we're here to liberate people. Talk about that, if you would.
Absolutely. And again, I spent the last 3 years organizing with a group called Vote Common Good, because they are like, look, these evangelicals, I don't know what Jesus you're talking about, but that is not.
Okay, so I'm not alone out here. Okay.
You are not alone. You are not alone. And we've been having really hard conversations with communities across faith communities across the nation, to really get at the heart of this is not at all what our faith tradition teaches us, right? And so, yes, I have been with Red Letter Christians. I've been with the Shane Claiborne and the Poor People's Campaign. I have been with Cori Bush is a pastor. Yep. People don't remember that. And Representative Bush is a pastor. So this really motivates a lot of what our mission is driven to, because when we stand for those who are of this tradition, when we stand before God and we talk about how we denied women access to health care, how we deny the poor opportunities to eat, but we could fund wars, when we denied people housing, that is just not going to fly. At the end of the day, we are all accountable for the things that we do and how we steward the resources that we have been gifted to have access to. And I want to stand accountable, and I want to be confident in my level of accountability that I did everything. I left nothing on the field, but I did everything to bring justice and liberty, compassion to every person that I am allowed to touch via whatever platform.
And I can't wait to hear those speeches in Congress, because when Representative Bush gets up and she speaks, it's like, it's literally, it's incredible. Yes. Imani, when you decided to run this cycle, the district looked a little bit different than last time. How have things changed for you?
Well, I mean, it didn't really change as far as really demographics are concerned. I mean, it's still over 80% Democratic. It's still majority Black district, majority minority district. So not much has changed. I mean, there were some towns that were out, but I mean, really, people are so fed up all over New Jersey with the games that the machine plays here. I mean, the messaging really didn't change much. People, when I go door to door, people are still saying like, yeah, just like, Dr. Spalding, same thing. This is the first person that's ever knocked on my door. People are saying that they are upset because their basements are flooding a lot and they want people to do something about climate change. People are saying the cost of education, especially higher education, and people who are concerned as to whether they can afford to send their kids to college. We get a lot of that. So, I mean, really, the messaging, it doesn't really change. The problems don't really change. There are some lines that have changed. But ultimately, I mean, people are sick and tired of New Jersey's machine. They're sick and tired of having somebody who is not working for them and really delivering real everyday things that they need. So, I mean, technically the lines changed, but not much really changed for us with that.
Good. So you took part in this event called Black Women Run, and it was in DC. And I love that there's solidarity, because a little known fact, I don't think people know this, but candidates aren't always helping each other out. And I think that's what's really beautiful about this and the movement of having progressives running across the country on similar platforms is you boost each other, you help each other, you grow. Rising tide lifts all ships, but it's like being an ally. So I'll go to Dr. Spalding first. What was that event like? And who else was part of it? We have some of the video right now. I think we lost her for a second. Did she freeze? All right. Well, then, Imani, we're going to go to you first.
Yeah, so it was my first time meeting pretty much all the other candidates there, but I really, really, really love the solidarity. And it's so interesting how we were all from all across the country, right? Like New Jersey, Ohio, Illinois, Maryland, Florida. but the kind of the things that you experience as a Black woman running for office are still consistent, no matter where you are in the country. You know, difficulty with people trying to paint us as angry, difficulty with people trying to paint us as unqualified, even though we're some of the most qualified people to run for office. People trying to just paint us in these different, very nasty ways that they use uniquely with Black women. And so being in a room of all these Black women who are overcoming that, getting past that, and really, really doing well and doing something positive was a great experience. I had a great time.
Now, Dr. Spalding, Reverend Spalding or Reverend Dr. Spalding? Which one goes first?
Either way, it doesn't really matter. Stephany is really good for me. But for that, I just want to say, when we talk about infrastructure, broadband access for a lot of communities is an issue. It's a concern. So you all just experienced that. But I was just, saying that for me, it was such a powerful experience to have this panel of women to run together, and shout out to Isra Allison, who's, it was her brainchild. One of the things that people don't know, yes, we talk about progressives and trying to get progressives in office. We talk about getting women in office and progressive women in office, but Black women are the least funded candidates across the country at every level. So to be a part of an event like this, where we are not, sharing resources, but really accomplices to each other as we are running, is such a powerful moment in history. And I just appreciate the work that each of these women are doing in their own districts, but also what we will bring to Congress when we win, and when we win together.
Imani, as I was listening to Stephany talk about the difficulties that Black women face in common, particularly around fundraising. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, as well as if you are facing anything, either of you really are facing any other type of pushback from the establishment that other progressive candidates, other Black women candidates like Cori Bush, like Nina Turner have faced. Imani, and then Stephany, if you would.
Oh, yeah. I mean, raising money is definitely difficult for a number of reasons. I mean, there's the inherent racism with regards to people they want to give to and buy. But there's also the fact that, a lot of, and maybe not, let me not speak for Dr. Spalding, but personally, a lot of my network are Black professionals. And even Black professionals, because of the way wealth has been created or not created in this country, that professional money goes to your aunt, goes to your mom, goes to your kid. It spreads all over. So I'm probably last on their priority list, which you got to take care of your family. And so that makes it difficult. Then you have on top of that folks' bias about whether they actually want to give Black women or not, if they're not in that situation. So it is very difficult. Again, we have been able to overcome that. We've raised over $470 million so far. And I'm really, really thankful for that. Again, all grassroots dollars. Our average donation is $33. So, we've done really well with that. But the nastiness is definitely coming. I mean, I've been called by pain supporters vagabond, which, some people don't really know what that word really entails. But if you've gone up around Caribbean people, being called a vagabond is that's a very nasty word. It's like somebody who's dirty and low down and nasty and disgusting. They've been trying to paint me as too ambitious, which is ironic. I'm running against a guy that doesn't show up to work, and they're like, "You want to show up to work too much." The games are there, and it's very particular against Black women. But of course, we've always overcome that, and I'm confident that myself, Dr. Spalding, and all the other women on that panel are going to overcome it this cycle also.
And similarly, I agree in a lot of ways, the way that Black wealth wealth just in this this country has been designed. Black women are, again, always the last on a lot of these lists. And so that expendable income is not present for us, even though ironically, we are often the highest educated and qualified. Look at the ways that we are examining Judge Ketanji Brown, right?
Exactly.
So So we get challenged on the ability to raise money, because most of these organizations, and even progressive organizations, sorry to say, it takes money to raise money. They want to know that you already have access to almost $100,000 in your own personal network before even progressive organizations will start to see you as a viable candidate. So that's on the fundraising side, but also to the credentialing side. I have people who are questioning my ordination, who question whether or not I am aiming again too high. And I'm like, I have a whole PhD. Like what? You know, and was tenured and left my job as the chief diversity officer for my university. Like a lot of things that in terms of bias are just levied against Black women. But what we do enjoy, what we see that people enjoy, they love our passion. They love it when we get in the spirit and our heads start to roll and our fingers begin to snap and we are giving the fire in terms of speaking to the issues and the concerns. They love that we are the most consistent voting bloc in the Democratic Party. But again, they do not invest in us as candidates.
Yep.
100%. Okay. Speaking of your candidacies, where we're going to put your information up. So don't worry about that. We'll have your websites up there on both the podcast and on the YouTube and Twitch channels. But election dates, and this includes like early voting. So make sure to mention to folks that date, because that's really important. So we'll go to Imani first. When's your primary date?
Yeah, so primary day is June 7th. VBMs are going to drop though April 24th. So if you are signed up for VBMs, or if you just want to vote by mail anyway, there's still time, I believe, for you to sign up. April 24th is the day. And I want to also make sure, because New Jersey has something unique called a ballot line. We have the most corrupt ballot design in the country, where machine favorites are put in one long column and progressive challenges are placed somewhere random on the ballot. So when you get your ballot, whether you're going to go in person or whether you are doing VBM, you're going to have to look for my name and then click it. So don't go down that line. Look for my name, Imani Oakley, and then click it. So that's April 24th, VBMs, and then that is June 7th is the election day.
Wow. Dr. Spaulding, when's your
so
election?
Our early voting and vote by mail begins June 7th, and our actual primary is June 28th. So we want Illinoisans to be prepared to look for our name. And I'll tell people, look, if you can remember the flower or the basketball, then you got me, right? It's either the rose or the Spalding, right? Then you can remember me. I will probably have the longest name on the ballot, both initials, first name, last name being the same. So yeah, we are encouraging people to vote early. Unfortunately, in a lot of districts, like across the country, there is a drop off during the midterm election cycle. So we really are encouraging people to come out and participate in this midterm.
Ben, do you got any questions before we?
I do. The most important question of all: when can I get both of you on my morning show? Because I think everybody needs to hear about both of your campaigns. You don't have to answer now.
I am ready whenever you are.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Listen, just send that email.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Love it. If you can give money or volunteer or both, go to their websites. If you're in the Chicago area, if you're in the New Jersey area or tri-state area, or if you want to go and help. I mean, I know people who are dedicated, who get on the road and go support candidates across the country. So.
Or you can do it from your home, wherever you are. I think we all have virtual phone banks. So wherever you are, you can volunteer.
Wonderful. Well, virtual phone banks, obviously dollars help a lot because it pays for those signs up there. It helps pay for pizzas when people go knock on doors. It pays canvassers. This is super important stuff. You have to have a viable campaign to be successful. You don't have to have millions of dollars, but we need to invest in more progressive working class women, and especially Black women, because as we know, the statistics are shocking. Stephany, Rose Spaulding, Imani Oakley, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Benjamin Dixon, as always.
Pleasure.
Love
Nomiki.
Wednesdays. Love Wednesdays.
The pleasure's always mine. Take care, everyone.
All right, folks. We had a special show today, but hey, are you joining us on all the podcast platforms? Did you know that your friend David has figured out how to put us on all the podcast platforms? I didn't even know we weren't on all. I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't even aware that we weren't on all the podcast platforms, but now we do know. And if you want to go even further, we have a very special podcast that we release on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. There's all different levels, as you know. And when you support us on Patreon, it helps us put together the other stuff. It helps us have a show. It helps, us pay for the light that I had to replace the other day. It helps us with everything. It helps me sleep at night. It helps David sleep at night. It helps feed us. We have all different types of levels, and of course you can get swag. And if you are a previous patron and you can afford to keep your patronage going, you can always email us at thenomikishow@gmail.com and we can work something out. If you want to sponsor another patron, you can do that too. There's so many generous people out there. You know how it is. We all have to support each other, but it takes a lot of work. I mean, we aren't just your average streamers, as you know. We put together a show, we find good guests, we pick good topics. That's really what this is about. So if you haven't already joined us on Patreon, please join us, patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, and share, like, subscribe, get the word out. We got to get it out. We got to beat those algorithms. Let's go beat the algorithms. That's, I'm going to get that tattooed or something. I don't know. No, I remember I was thinking about getting like a Bernie tattoo in 2015 because I didn't want to forget the moment. I'm glad I didn't. It's not that about Bernie. I'm glad I didn't do that. So I think about tattoos. Like then I become too obsessed and then I get over it. So full credit to folks who are able to take those risks. I just let it marinate in my head for too long and then I'm over it. All right, everybody. Thank you for a great show. We will see you on Friday for Femme Friday. Join us on all the different platforms. Make sure to click the little subscribe and you'll get a notice. And we will see you on Friday. In the meantime, stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system. Unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.